Welcome back to another clay video. Today we are going to create Glumstone the Giant from Cuphead, the delicious last course. After creating the world map, I've been super excited to create a boss, and this ended up being the biggest figure I have ever created. I'm obviously not including maps in this, just figures themselves. And since this is going to be so big, I'm going to be using a lot of different things for filling. With the main platform, I used this big chunk of wood, and for the character itself, I'm going to use a lot of aluminum foil. In this boss battle, these little gnomes come shooting out of the ground, so I'm going to create one of the lumps that they come out of. Let's cover everything in white, and we can start making the edges a bit jagged. At first, you might think this battle is a snow level, but actually it's the giant's beard that you're battling on top of. You can see this especially when he rips his beard off and moves on to the second phase, which is what we're creating. All of the bosses in Cuphead have multiple different phases, so we have some different options of boss designs to choose from. After baking, we can move on to creating the Glumstone Giant himself. Now I have no idea what a glumstone is, but it makes me think of some type of candy. Like a mixture between gumdrops and rock candy. Anyway, let's move on to the figure. I'm using some aluminum wire and aluminum foil to create the base for the giant. Personally, I really don't like working with foil because it makes the clay very lumpy on top of it, but I thought of a trick that will hopefully help. I'm going to coat it in a layer of junk clay and then bake it, and on top of that we'll put the good color of clay, and hopefully that will eliminate most of the lumps. After coating the entire body, we can trim up these little edges, straighten out the wires, and start adding on the arms. Now there's multiple ways you could add arms onto a figure, and I've done these multiple different ways, and I want to say the best way is just simply sliding it onto the wire. An alternative way is cutting the clay worm in half and then folding it around it. I tend to have a lot of trouble with this, so I just like to use the sliding method. We need to extend the arms a little bit for the puppet, so let's add in some extra wires and start working on the head. I will admit I was terrified to do this part because I don't have very much experience with faces. I'll put a few examples on screen of the human faces I've created. And you can see why I was a little bit worried. Of course, these are a few years old and I've gotten a lot better since, but still, I was a little bit unsure. The eyes don't actually look like this in the first phase, but he gets pretty beat up, so we have to add in the purple eye. Let's add in some nice thick eyebrows, and we can move on to trimming up the body a bit. Mostly everything below the nose is covered up by the base, and you don't really see it until he turns his head in the battle, so luckily we don't have to actually create a mouth. Of course I would if I had to, but I'm glad that I don't. After ripping off his beard, he has some fresh stubble, so I blended in a lighter shade of gray, and this gave a really nice shadow for the beard. We have some kind of unsettling puffy cheeks. And not only does this giant live in the mountains, he also pretty much is a mountain. We have to create all of these spikes on top of his head, and we can cover it up with some hair or snow, depending on which you prefer to see it as. In the front and along the sideburns, I've cut out a bunch of random little pieces. I've added some super glue onto this wire, and this will be how we attach the head. But first, let's get some clothes because our giant has been shirtless far too long. I really like this shirt. It's like one of those cool medieval looking leather shirts. We have a little triangle out at the end, and then we can make some stitching on the shoulders, which is one of those details that doesn't really take much effort, but adds so much detail into the figure. If you'll notice, there's a lot of cracks in the brown clay, and this was unintentional. It's just kind of some dry clay and I ran it through my pasta machine, but it turned out to work very nicely for the clothing effect. This just isn't gonna be okay, so let's add in a neck, and that will hopefully stop it from giving me nightmares. We need to bulk up the back of the head because even though it looks good on the front, it doesn't look very good in the back. While I was creating this, I kept looking at him and thinking there was something missing, but I could not figure out what. And then I realized when I was just about to throw it in the oven that I forgot his ears. He looks a lot better with the ears on him now. I decided to bulk up the neck just a little bit more in anticipation of the white clay. Because I'm not sure why, but I value white clay way more than any other clay. It's the same price as any other color, but for some reason I treasure it like gold. I feel like it's pretty weird, but maybe there's some other people out there who do it as well. Moving on to my personal favorite detail, the puppets. They might not be so fun to battle, but they are fun to create. And I have to applaud the developers for such a creative, amazing design. Out of the main game and the DLC, there isn't a boss I've liked even close to as much in design as this one. I can't say I particularly care for the third phase, it's kind of disgusting, but this second phase is very nice. So the head of this puppet is a dice, and I know it's only one, so you don't call it a dice, you call it a die, but I'll leave that to you to attack me in the comments. It's always fun to read these comments of people correcting things I say. Somehow I always say something wrong in every single video. This puppet looks like a medieval jester, so we have to create this multicolored hat. And I realized I actually put it on the wrong way. The purple's supposed to be on the left side, but I guess if I didn't say anything, you probably would have never known. After we attach the head onto the body, we can add more of those jingly bells onto all of the spikes on this puppet. Now onto the arms, which are pretty basic and easy to create. The only trouble comes in when I have to create the hands. This is something you probably haven't heard in quite a while. You mostly hear me complain about stars, but hands are actually worse than stars. Since nearly the beginning of my channel, I've purposely avoided creating characters that have fingers. I know that's limited me some, but also I mostly create maps and characters that don't even have hands. So it's worked out perfectly fine for me. I'm sure if I kept practicing making hands, I would get better at it, but it's just something that I really don't want to do. This puppet has a fancy little cloak. So first I'm going to size it up with this flat sheet of purple, and then I'm going to take it off and outline it in some white. We can place it back on, and I think that looks really good. Moving on to the arms, which are slightly different than the other one. Instead of hands, we have claws. And now, we are ready to get baked. After baking, I could call it good here, but I want to add a little bit more into it. And since we're creating a boss from the DLC, what better character to create than Miss Chalice? I'm creating this character to be very small and I'm not using any wires, so what I'm going to do is make it in separate little sections and bake them as I go. I really only have to bake it for 5 or 10 minutes in between, just to make sure it's hard enough to build on top of it. Everything on the body was fairly easy to create, but the real trouble comes in when I have to create the hands. In my videos, I feel like it's always one of those things where you can't really tell how tiny things are. So to give you a quick example, Miss Chalice's hand is probably 1/5 of the size of a Tic Tac. So it's pretty troubling to create. The final part we need to create on Miss Chalice is the head, or the chalice. When Miss Chalice is in battle, she looks pretty angry, or at least pretty focused on the battle. I don't think I'm going to be able to capture this super well. No matter what I do, my characters just usually end up looking happy. But either way, we made a nice little character. After baking, we can super glue it onto the base, and that is our final detail. So here it is, Miss Chalice versus Glumstone the Giant from Cuphead the Delicious Last Course. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you want to see some more Cuphead clay things I've created, you can click on the playlist at the end of this video. And if you want to see some more Cuphead bosses, let me know in the comments what you would like to see. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.